Pleasure to introduce Patrick Smith, the Managing Director of AMC Consultants, to introduce Peter Bradford.
Peter Bradford joined IGO Limited, formerly Independence Group, as Managing Director and CEO in March 2014. He has almost 40 years' experience in gold and base metal operations, exploration and development, and has held senior positions in Australia and around the world. Peter's a graduate of WASM, the West Australian School of Mines, and holds a degree in extractive metallurgy. Before reaching the age of 30, he rose through the ranks at WA's Gidgee mine to the position of General Manager, overseeing the mine's construction and development. He worked in the DRC and he worked in Ghana. And in Ghana, he oversaw the development of the Idiaprym gold mine in 1992, and this mine continues operating today. Peter returned to WA in 2014 to take up his current role at IGO. His leadership in the acquisition of Sirius Resources in 2015, and then the subsequent development and construction of the Nova nickel, copper, cobalt mine is another milestone in his illustrious career. The Nova mine is now 2 years into commercial operation. Peter's a fellow of the AusArMem, president of AMEC, chairman of the Brighter Futures Scholarship Campaign Committee at Curtin University. He's a passionate advocate for young people in the mining industry, and he's also a passionate advocate for achieving greater gender diversity and greater inclusion within our mining industry. He's a member of the CEOs for Gender Equity and regularly volunteers to mentor young women in the Women in Mining program. Members and guests, please welcome Peter Bradford to the Melbourne Mining Club.
Thanks, Patrick, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends and colleagues. I acknowledge Melbourne Mining Club co-patrons, Lee Clifford and Hugh Morgan, in the audience with us today. I last presented here at the Melbourne Mining Club in 2015, so a lot of things have happened at IGO and for myself over the last 4 or 5 years, so it's really good to be back here to once again talk to you about what's happening with me, what's happening with the company, and what's happening with our industry. I'm not 100% sure on how much time I've got today because I did talk to Gavin earlier. I said it's 25 minutes, right? And he said, oh, you can go to 30, and that's without even negotiating. So I think it's a fairly wide bandwidth there. What I do want to focus on in the presentation is people. You know, the people in the business, the people around the business in the community, and the people in society, you know, that group out there who we need to convince about the importance of mining for a better planet in the future. I do want to spend a little bit of time on bushfires. You know, we have bushfire season every year in Australia, but this year, particularly on the East Coast, these have been of an unprecedented scale and devastation, and my heartfelt sympathies to all those that have been impacted in some way, shape or form. Bushfire risk is on the top 20 business critical risks for IGO, and for 2 reasons. Number one is about protecting our people. And we have many geologists, 100 people in our exploration team, and they're often working in isolated areas, and they're prone to bushfire risk in those areas, and those fires can move very quickly through the bushland and the spinifex grass. So the best way we can mitigate the risk to them is to keep them out of the bush during bushfire season, and we do that from December through to February. The other area where we're potentially impacted by bushfires is our assets at Nova. Less potential impact for employees because we've got well-established systems and safe areas for them, but we do have further measures to protect our assets. As you would have read in the press, we had bushfires close to Nova this year, and in fact those bushfires closed down the air highway that umbilical cord between the East Coast and the West Coast for about 2 weeks. And although the operations weren't impacted by fire, the logistical aspects of getting supplies in and concentrate out were. At IGO, our people, along with other community members, local pastoralists, the Shire, Department of Fire Emergency Services, we all work together to control those fires. And on this slide, you can see the Department of Fire and Emergency Services who are based at Nova during these fires, stepping through some of the equipment they carry on board their helicopter, which was a real education for our emergency response team. But it's not the only way we participate with the community. We're always active, and we have a corporate giving allocation, a percentage of our revenue, where we provide much needed funds to not-for-profits and other organisations that do good work within the communities close to our mining and exploration activities. But it's not just about money. We also encourage our people to get actively involved with the community on a volunteer basis, and we provide volunteer leave days. And you often see me, and also our chairman, Peter Bilby, will be out there cooking dinner for Ronald McDonald House Charities, or picking up foodstuffs for Oz Harvest and delivering those. And most frequently, though, you'll see me walking. So late last year, I was walking for Ronald McDonald House Charities, 42-kilometre walk, up all night. Managed to beat my previous year's time by 32 minutes, so I was really chuffed with that. But more importantly, our team raised $50,000 for Ronald McDonald House Charities, which was absolutely fantastic. I'll be out walking again next month, 15th of March, for the Euroz Big Walk, raising money for Perth Children's Hospital. There's my funding page. Got a captive audience here. Get out your phone, get out your credit card, dial in that address, and please make a contribution to a very worthwhile charity. All of that is part of who we are. At IGO, our purpose is making a difference. And this purpose and the accompanying narrative were co-created with the people in the business. This is who the people in the business want to be. This is not Peter Bilby, the chairman, saying, this is our purpose. This is not me doing it. This is the people in the business collaborating to define it. And the language here, it's powerful, it's humanistic, and it's emotive. You possibly can't read it there, so I'll read some out to you. We are bold, passionate, fearless, and fun. A smarter, kinder, more innovative company. It talks to who we are. It also talks about why we do it. We believe in a green energy future, and by delivering the metals for new age batteries, we are making it happen. Powerful stuff. And it also talks to how we do it. Our teams are finding and producing the specialist metals that will make energy storage mobile, efficient, and effective enough to make long-term improvements to the lifestyles of hundreds of millions of people across the globe. Once again, powerful stuff. This drives our strategic focus as a business, and that is to focus on metals critical to clean energy. In that space, we want to be globally relevant. We want to make quality products that our customers desire. We want to be vertically integrated, and we want to be proactively green. And all done by people who are highly engaged and high performing. So that's our DNA, but let me talk a little bit more about DNA. DNA, mining is in my DNA. I didn't know it when I was growing up, but what I know now is that my ancestors worked in the mining districts all across South Australia, Queensland and Western Australia. And I've got many ancestors who are buried in cemeteries in those mining towns, including Norseman, which is right next to our Nova nickel copper mine. But care is also in my DNA. It's something that I bring to my job today. I was the eldest of 5 children, and I cared for my younger siblings, whether they felt they needed it or not. Collaboration is also part of my DNA, as well as drinking lots of cups of tea and coffee to lubricate the conversation. And if at any time you're in our offices or at one of our mines, I'll be the first one to make sure you've got a cup of tea or a coffee so that we can have a great conversation and collaborate. Lastly, most importantly, cars are in my DNA. And although this car, my first one, wasn't a V8, pretty much all the rest, from my Holden HZ 1978 panel van through to my GDSR HSV and my 1969 Mustang, which are both parked in the garage, they've all been V8s. But I'm afraid all of those V8s, those gas guzzlers, are destined to go the way of the dodo. They're destined for the scrap heap. And they're to be replaced by cars like this. This is my Tesla S. I took delivery in October, and this is a fantastic car. 0 to 100 in 2.5 seconds, 650 kilometre range, and being someone that likes a bit of tech, it's got all the tech you could ever imagine. I can't see myself ever owning a different type of car. So unfortunately, my GDSR and my Mustang do not get a lot of love. But I do this because it's a personal choice to try and make a difference. And when I fuel this, it's off the solar panels on my roof. And I adjust the charge going into the car to make sure it's matched to the electrons coming from the solar panel. So that's me making a difference. But it's not me alone. There's millions of people across the globe that want to make a difference to clean up the oceans and clean up the air. But also governments are making a difference. We're seeing governments focus on clean energy infrastructure, as well as government incentives to promote clean energy. And we're also seeing regulation to bring down vehicle emissions. And on this chart, you can see the progress that's been made over the last 20 years to reduce CO2 emissions in new passenger vehicles. That's come down a lot in all of the major economies, including Australia, though Australia is lagging the pack, but that's because we don't really have any vision in the area. Some governments have got forward-looking projections. You look at the EU, by 2021, they're going to reduce those CO2 emissions to 91 grams per kilometre, and by 2030 to 59 grams per kilometre. So those sort of numbers don't mean a lot to many of us in the room. So to put that in a language we do understand, that's just over 2.5 litres per 100 kilometres of petrol. 2.5 litres average across a whole new vehicle fleet. That seems impossible. But the only thing that makes it possible is a greater implementation, more hybrid vehicles and more battery electric vehicles. What that's going to do, this blue line on the chart, that's going to cause an explosion of electric vehicle numbers going forward. And there's always a temptation in these sort of presentations to put the most exaggerated sort of predictions on the page, but this is middle of the road. These numbers here, I think they're from Roskill. I was looking at some other numbers from Bloomberg, New Energy Finance, and there's a sort of 2 to 3 times the numbers that I've got on the chart here. We're going to see an explosion in new vehicles, and that's because people like myself, many other consumers, they're making a proactive choice, and we're doing that because we want to make a difference, but also because we're seeing increasingly better, more efficient vehicles that are electric, that have the performance and the range. And that performance and range is being delivered by better batteries, and those better batteries have got more nickel in them. So by 2025, Goldman Sachs estimate that 80% of cathode chemistry is going to be from 811 NCM batteries, so nickel, cobalt, manganese, or NCA batteries, nickel, cobalt, aluminium. So think about that, an explosion of electric vehicle numbers, a trend towards more nickel in every battery. That's a perfect storm for nickel, and what that does is create disruptive demand pull at a time when we've underinvested in new nickel production and we're destined for a nickel supply deficit. We've already been in deficit for 3 years, and we're going to have an enduring deficit over the next 10 years based on known new supply and expected demand pull. That means, in the not too distant future, that nickel warehouse is going to be empty. But it's not just nickel, it's also copper. To me, copper is even more important in this clean energy revolution. You need more copper to build an extra unit of renewable energy production than you do for an extra unit of old energy production. And the numbers are something like 4 to 12 times more copper. Then you need more copper to move those electrons into grid-scale energy storage, and more copper to move those electrons into electric vehicles, and every electric vehicle has got 30 kilograms more copper. That's a lot of copper. You would think with that dynamic set up for nickel and copper that we would be seeing a surge in nickel and copper exploration. Right? It's not really a surge, there's more of a sort of a little whimper there. And overall, over the last decade, we've seen a reduction in investment in copper and nickel exploration globally. And that will be one of the contributors to why we're seeing less significant discoveries. And there's a great slide here put together by Richard Schoddy, and it shows the last century and how we've had generally an upwards trend of significant discoveries, and then we're reversing that trend over the last 10 years. And part of that will be we're underinvesting in exploration, and part of it will be we've taken the low-hanging fruit off the tree, and the challenge is getting harder and harder, and we need to develop better science to be able to unlock those future discoveries. So let me talk a little bit about what IGO is doing to drive discovery. Well, the first thing is we have expanded our budget. We've doubled it over the last 3 or 4 years, and this year we'll spend $66 million Australian. And of that, about 40% is what we would classify as brownfields, and 60% is greenfields intended to discover those new mines of the future. Our focus is belt-scale districts that have the potential to deliver multiple Tier 1 discoveries. And all of our districts are focused on nickel and copper exploration. Copper exploration projects where we're hunting for giants in the Northern Territory, the Patterson in Western Australia, and also in Greenland and South Australia. And then nickel exploration targeting magmatic nickel sulfide belts in the Northern Territory, in the Kimberleys in Western Australia, and most importantly, on the Fraser Range around our Nova operation. When we look at terrain selection, we use a number of proprietary prospectivity tools and identify regions. And then we've got the benefit of a second stage filter with the De Beers database, a collection of samples that De Beers collected right across Australia. And we can utilise those to do early assessment of terrains that we like. And we're really putting that De Beers database, which has historically been underworked, we're fully deploying that and fully utilising it today. We screen belts quickly using a combination of geophysics and geochem. And our philosophy is to either demonstrate and find the evidence that our conceptual model is right, or we fail it fast and move on to the next thing. And people will see a churn in our greenfields exploration portfolio in the coming years as we test our models and either move forward or fail them to the bin. And you would have seen one of our belt-scale lithium projects where we had a model, we put boots on the ground, we tested the model, and we decided that that wasn't for us. It's then all about the detailed work to identify targets, to test targets, and here we are developing EM and geophysics generally as one of our competitive edges, and we do a significant amount in the EM space, particularly in R&D, to extend the depth that we can search and also to extend the range around drill holes that we can search. We're dealing undercover, largely on the Fraser Range, and these are our primary exploration and prospecting tools. And then lastly, from a brownfields point of view, we're leveraging 3D seismic to understand the geology. And we were early adopters of this technology at Long in 2007. then used it in collaboration with Anglo Gold Ashanti at Tropicana, and then in 2018 we did a 50 square kilometre grid at Nova. And this gives us an understanding of that geological architecture with confidence down to 2 kilometres, and is our primary search tool, because down to those depths the other tools just don't have any reach. So just a little bit of background on what we're doing on the Fraser Range generally and the scale of that endeavour. Fraser Range, which is a belt that we think is prospective for Nova-style discoveries, extends over a distance, a strike of some 420 kilometres. 420 kilometres. That's the distance, for those in the room that might have driven it, of Cambolda to Laverton. That's a huge distance, and if you've been out there and you've seen the gold mine after gold mine, nickel mine after nickel mine, you'll realise the sort of concentration that could be achieved. And that's what drives our imagination on the Fraser Range. We have progressed our reconnaissance, we've identified hundreds of targets, and we're now in a target testing phase on the Fraser Range. And closer to home at Nova, the right-hand side graphic here, we have pretty much progressed that to the same extent as well. We have a high conviction that there's more Novas to be found. That conviction has been validated with recent discoveries by Legend Mining and Creasy, and we continue the work to drive our own discoveries. So let's talk about Nova. Nova was discovered, well, first off, this slide here is a great slide. On the horizon there you can see our non-process infrastructure, or the lights from it. In the sort of just below that there's the box cut where our portal is, and in the foreground our processing facilities where we produce two concentrates, a copper sulfide concentrate and a nickel cobalt concentrate. Both of those are shipped to market via the air highway and a bitumen road that we have to access that. Nova itself was discovered in July 2012, and we brought it into commercial production just 5 years later in July 2017. And we acquired this from Sirius, who were the explorers that identified it, and last time I was here at the Mining Club, it was immediately on the back of having completed that acquisition, and we were just embarked on the journey to bring the mine into production. And what a fun ride that has been. 10 quarters of production, 2.5 years, and over the last 7 quarters, the quarterly production has exceeded the average quarterly run rate in the feasibility study. And our costs, our cash costs, are the lowest cash costs for a nickel mine in Australia. What that means is we drive, together with our gold interest at Tropicana, we drive great financials. Last week on Thursday, we put out our half-year financials. I think we're the only group that have done that so far. And we saw great metrics. $100 million NPAT for the half, $200 million free cash flow for the half, and that just drives spend on exploration, cash returns to shareholders, and strength on the balance sheet. So just under $400 million net cash on the balance sheet. And going forward, we expect Nova to be the stronger contributor on the portfolio, but for Tropicana to continue to also provide reliable, hedged gold income for us. And you'll note there that Long and Jaguar projects we spoke to when I was last here, we divested them so that we could focus on our bigger activities going forward. But we don't just focus on the financial metrics. We also focus on everything else, and we're really proud of the fact that we've delivered 5 sustainability reports to report on how we do the job, the care we're taking for the environment, what we're doing around water, power, and with our people and their safety and well-being. Our sustainability reports have been well recognised, and they're rated as leading disclosure by the Australian Council for Superannuation Investors. And also note that just before Christmas, we're admitted to the Dow Jones Sustainability Index at the 78th percentile. So that's a great place to be, and it's good recognition of the approach that we take in this area, in addition to our operating and financial results. One example of some of the good things we're doing is this Nova solar farm. We commissioned this in November. It provides about 15% of our overall power requirement, over the 24-hour clock, and reduces our carbon footprint by about 6,500 tonnes of CO2 per year. So we're now working on things we can do to expand some of that work we're doing in that area. And the first one of those we're looking at is the potential to potentially change our diesel-fired power station to natural gas. And that again would result in a reduction in our carbon footprint by about 15,000 tonnes per year. And we've also started to look at electric vehicles underground, and we'll do our first trial with electric light vehicles this year. And if Nova was built today, it would be an all-electric mine. And that would have meant we would have made different capital decisions with less ventilation requirements and different cost structures going forward. But let me talk about some of the other things we're doing, smart solutions we're deploying to improve productivity, reduce cost, and improve safety outcomes. Early, we put in a fibre optic backbone and Wi-Fi system underground. That was an enabler. It's enabled us to bolt on real-time data capture and control. It's allowed us to bolt on real-time tracking of people and equipment. And I've got to tell you that that's much more reliable than people putting a tag on a board. And it's also allowed us to do remote bogging and remote blasting from surface. And we've also done early trials to do that remotely from Perth as well, and they were highly successful. So that allows us to start thinking differently about the future of work. On the process plant side, we've done similar things, real-time tracking and control, real-time, all-the-time analysis of our process streams, and some of the work we've done in that area earned our metallurgical team the Met Plant Innovation Award for 2019. So a great job by the guys there. But it's not the only area where we're innovating. We're innovating across the business, and perhaps the biggest area was the work we did over the last 2 years in downstream processing. We tried to picture how we could do things differently. Instead of taking our nickel sulfide concentrate and putting it on a boat and selling it to a smelter, could we unlock the value ourselves? And we developed a whole new process, what we call the IGO process, which is simple and elegant, with relatively low pressure, low temperature, pressure oxidation, neutralisation, solvent extraction, and crystallisation. Nothing complicated there, all well-established unit processes. And we were successfully able to produce a battery-grade nickel sulfate, and we're able to do that more efficiently with better extractions and lower cost and less waste footprint than conventional technologies such as smelting. And reducing waste was a key aspiration here. We imagined a process that would be waste-free, and we're able to move all of the sulfur waste into an ammonium sulfate byproduct for sale to the fertiliser industry, and we're working with one of the universities to develop a soil conditioner that could use the iron waste. We have down tools on this process. It was technically successful, but in the face of better and improved payabilities from smelters, it didn't, and building it in Australia, financially it didn't make sense. Return rates were around 11%. However, we did create interest offshore, and we've had a number of groups approach us saying they want to take the technology further in jurisdictions where there's better cost structures, and we're collaborating currently with a couple of those groups to see what we can do differently. That there are some batteries that we made from our nickel sulfate, so it allows me to walk around saying this is truly battery grade. I started talking about people. I want to finish by talking about people. And it's really about how we continue to attract people to the industry, how we continue to develop and keep the people we have in the industry, and how we can change community perceptions. And one of the things we do at IGO is interaction with the schools. We try to talk to young adults and kids early to allow them to imagine a career in mining. And oftentimes they've never even contemplated it. Mining just hasn't come into their sphere of influence. And this is a group of young adults that, as part of a program where we bring them to Nova each year for a camp. They spend 5 days on site. They interact with our professionals. They do a small project, and we try to light up their imagination. And they go away, and we've seen some of them make life-changing decisions to select different subjects in the latter years of high school, and to then select mining-related disciplines at university. So great outcomes. But we also support, the next generation of industry participants and leaders on many other levels through multiple scholarship programs to support them while they're studying, but also providing vacation work so they can understand the career that they're moving into, as well as offering internships, graduate placements to guarantee that they've got a job after getting their degrees. And this year, we've taken in 12 new graduates across a wide range of disciplines, not just mining engineering, geology and metallurgy, but also finance, IT and a number of others. And that's a 2-year program, so at any one time we'll have 20 or so graduates in the system. And when you think about the size of the workforce, where we're 350 people all up, 20 graduates in an internship at any one time is a large percentage of the workforce. So we believe we're punching above our weight, and we need to, and as an industry we need to ensure that we continue to have the leaders of the future. How are we going for time? I've got a short video, I can play it. And this just speaks to our purpose.
At IGO, we believe in a world where people power makes amazing things happen, where technology opens up new horizons and clean energy makes the planet a better place for every generation to come. Our people are bold, passionate, fearless and fun. We are a smarter, kinder and more innovative company. Our work is making fundamental changes to the way communities all over the world grow, prosper and stay sustainable. Our teams are finding and producing the specialist metals that will make energy storage mobile, efficient and effective enough to make long-term improvements to the lifestyle of hundreds of millions of people across the globe. How? New battery storage technology is finally unleashing the full potential of renewable energy by allowing power produced from the sun, wind and other sources to be stored and used when and where it's needed. This technology will impact future generations in ways we cannot yet imagine, improving people's quality of life and changing the way we live. We believe in a green energy future, and by delivering the metals needed for new age batteries, we're making it happen. We are the IGO difference.
So ladies and gentlemen, that was just so you could finish listening to something more entertaining and something more pleasant to watch than me. Put this slide back up again. It's a gratuitous advertisement. I know there's a number of students in the audience. If you're thinking about your career, contact us at igofurther@igo.com.au.
Thank you. A big thank you to Peter, and we're now open to some questions from the floor. So I would ask, we've got our roving microphones, so if people could please state your name and where you've come from and ask your questions. So I think we have a first question over here.
Hi, Peter. Very good talk. Thank you. Gianni Kovacevic from Copperbank in Vancouver. I also travel around the world and I speak at various conferences. My question for you is, when you're speaking to people in the incumbent energy system, a gathering like CERAWeek in Houston, Texas, where the last 2 years, the word was electrification. Every CEO of every company. The word copper or nickel was not mentioned by one person. Do you find in your discussions, people are oblivious to the importance of these commodities in the future of energy?
I would say that's a fair call. And if you look at the projections on the energy mix going forward over the next 50 years and how number one, the demand increases, and we're going to meet that increased demand with renewables, and in fact we're going to reduce the amount of old energy. That explosion of copper and nickel that we're going to need to support that is just absolutely huge. So we're going to get an oh shit moment in the future where those companies wake up, and then we're going to get everyone scrambling to get into nickel and copper. And old energy companies are going to try and recreate themselves again as mineral companies.
Question down the front, over here.
Thanks very much, Peter. Dave Clark from GHD and on the board of the AusIMM. You mentioned earlier the fail fast sort of mentality or preparedness, at least through the exploration stages. And then you spoke about some great sort of outcomes or achievements in terms of productivity and innovations that you've been able to implement. How does this fail fast sort of mentality and approach flow through beyond the exploration stage through the value chain, I guess, please, within the organisation?
Yeah, sure. You can't. The reality is you can't encourage innovation and get people to embrace it unless you communicate that it's okay to fail. And so we need to make sure that message is strong. Otherwise, people won't try. So we approach it an exploration tenure. From an exploration tenure perspective, we think about it with some of the R&D we're doing with our discovery tools. But we also apply that when we're doing some of the things we do within the operations to improve productivity and reduce costs, and when we're doing the more bigger picture innovations such as the downstream processing. We had no certainty when we started that whether what we were trying to achieve was achievable. We just conceived it, tried to think of how we could do it differently, and then did the work, and at each stage we became more and more surprised at how technically successful it was. But at any time that could have stopped working and we would have failed it fast.
Thank you. Down here in the front.
Thank you. Joe Kokutsa, previous head of Amara and now independent consultant. Well done, Peter, and impressed at a human-centred company, IGO. Fantastic. You may be expecting this question, but Don Lindsay was recently reported as committing tech to a carbon neutral company by 2050. Will this start a stampede, do you think, amongst companies to follow suit? And if so, where does IGO stand on that?
Yeah, I think mining companies as a whole are doing far more and achieving more than most people realise or understand. And it's because we tend to be silent achievers. And we're not alone in building a solar farm. You would have seen recent announcements with Saracen completing theirs, recent news reports on the progress that Goldfields is making with their solar and wind, and their total investment is something like $112 million. So the mining industry is doing a lot, and as an industry and as individual companies, we need to talk about it a bit more so that the society as a whole can understand, and they can understand that we're not the bad guys. We are part of the solution. We will need these metals to create the future that we all want for future generations. We haven't yet addressed our climate change policy, and we haven't yet enunciated what we would want to achieve as a milestone. This is something we intend to bring to our board later this year. But we have a team, including one of our recent graduates who's gone through our graduate program, who's working to understand what others are doing and work towards developing that policy for IGO. And what an opportunity for a graduate, a couple of years out, to be having that sort of work program. Hope that answers the question.
Down in the middle, towards the back.
Hi there, Peter. I'm Harry Turner from the AusIMM. You spoke about how IGO articulates its value to the communities it's working in Australia, but your own career has taken you to a few different jurisdictions. I think DRC was one of them, and there were a few others. How is that conversation different in different jurisdictions and different places around the world?
Yeah, great question. So I worked in Ghana off and on for about 12 years, and then was involved in the DRC on the ground for 3 or 4 years. And The reality is, I think that better prepares you for some of these sort of discussions than if I had have spent the whole of my career working in Australia, because you actually have far more community engagement thrust upon you in those sort of jurisdictions than you do in Australia. And they were great building blocks for me. I had really proactive engagement with the communities, such that I should have paused to rethink what I was doing, because when two different villages at two different times make you a chief, and the chief, when you convert it from the local tongue to English, is basically chief of development, i.e. you bring the money. You've got to start worrying about whether you're doing too much. But I certainly enjoyed that. It was a great building block for me and part of my DNA today.
I think we have a last question just over here on the side. Thank you.
Peter Arden from Bell Potter. Peter, we've heard a lot about the De Beers database over the years, and I'm just wondering if there's something wrong with it in one respect, that it doesn't cover enough of the Fraser Range, otherwise you would have unlocked greater value from it?
Yeah, the reality though today is we've done far more work on the Fraser Range than the De Beers database would have been able to provide us with, and its only role would have been an indicator of whether we should have been there at all sort of 5 or so years ago. But I would have to say now that although the company's talked about De Beers database for a long time, now we're at the point where we've actually done some serious work with it, and the collection of samples is now in a state where everything's properly catalogued, easily accessible, and we can really reach out and select the sample we want at any one time to test a terrain. And I'm not sure that the company could have made that statement in the past. So we've invested some real dollars, and we expect to get some real benefits going forward.
It's now my pleasure to introduce John Tivy, the partner from White & Case, to deliver a vote of thanks to Peter.
Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. You spoke to us about the importance of people and safety, community, and you outlined the values of IGO and your strategy around battery minerals and clean energy. Importantly, you outlined how clean energy and regulation are reducing CO2 emissions and leading to an explosion of EV sales. Your personal journey from petrol head to battery head is evidence of that. Yeah. You outlined how IGO's operations and exploration strategy are built around meeting this increasing demand profile of nickel and copper to meet these exploding EV sales. On behalf of Melbourne Mining Club, thank you, Peter, and I would now like to present this gift to you as a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I should be able to walk around amongst our exploration and discovery team and look like I know what I'm doing, or at least be able to incentivise them to work harder.